The coming revolution, how overproduction of elites threatens stability. When we think about revolutions, the image that often comes to mind is that of the oppressed poor rising up against the wealthy elites, the hungry peasants, the struggling workers, the masses demanding justice, bread, and freedom. But history tells a different story. The driving force behind many revolutions is not the poorest in society, but rather the frustrated elite, people who are educated, people who are ambitious, people who feel entitled to positions of power, prestige, and influence, but who find those positions closed off to them. They are the lawyers, the scholars, the bureaucrats, the military officers, the businessmen, individuals who stand close to the top, but not quite at the top. This is what the Russian-American professor Peter Turchin calls the overproduction of elites, a phenomenon where a society produces more highly educated and ambitious people than it can actually absorb into elite positions. And when this happens, when expectations rise faster than opportunities, history shows us that the results can be explosive. But what causes this overproduction of elites? According to Peter Turchin, one of the key mechanisms behind this phenomenon is something he calls the wealth pump. The wealth pump describes the process by which economic systems drain resources from the vast majority of the population, the so-called bottom 90%, and concentrate them into the hands of a small elite at the top. Today, we can see this clearly in the stagnation of real wages for most workers, in the soaring costs of housing, healthcare, education, and basic goods, in the widening gap between the cost of living and the actual earning power of the middle and working classes. But the effects of the wealth pump go beyond economics. It reshapes society, it reshapes expectations, and it feeds two dangerous processes at the same time. First, at the top of society, it fuels the overproduction of elites. More students graduate from universities each year, carrying high expectations of stable, well-paid, and respected jobs. But the number of such jobs, and especially in politics, government, law, media, and business leadership, does not grow fast enough to match these ambitions. The result is a surplus of highly educated, highly ambitious individuals with nowhere to go. A growing group of frustrated people, stuck just below the top, but believing they should be there. But the second effect of the wealth pump happens at the opposite end of society. This is what Turchin calls population immiseration. While the elites and their aspirants compete for power, the majority of the population faces declining living standards, stagnant wages, rising debt, jobs that no longer pay enough to support a family, the dream of home ownership drifting further out of reach. This growing hardship makes the broader population more vulnerable to political radicalization, more open to revolutionary messages, more willing to support candidates, movements, or ideologies that promise to tear down the system. In other words, while frustrated elites may light the match, population immiseration supplies the fuel. Together, these two dynamics, overproduction of elites and immiseration of the masses, create the perfect conditions for social unrest. This dangerous mix of elite overproduction and popular immiseration is not new. History offers many examples of what happens when too many people compete for too few positions at the top, while the majority struggle to survive at the bottom. Let's begin with medieval Europe. In the Middle Ages, noble status was inherited. Families passed down their titles to sons, grandsons, great-grandsons. But the land, the economic foundation of noble privilege, was finite. Over generations, the number of nobles grew, but the amount of land available to support them did not. What happens when there are too many nobles? And not enough land? Frustrated young aristocrats without estates of their own became mercenaries, crusaders, or rebels. Their ambitions turned outward, fueling wars, colonization, and sometimes open revolt. The same pattern appeared in 18th century France, on the eve of the French Revolution. The old aristocracy held tightly onto the best posts in government, the military, and the church. But alongside them, a growing bourgeoisie, merchants, lawyers, professionals, rose in wealth and education. They were well connected. They were well qualified. They believed they deserved influence and recognition. But the positions of power were already occupied. This frustration among the rising middle class became one of the engines of revolution. And it wasn't just France. A similar dynamic unfolded in late 19th century Russia. After the abolition of serfdom, a new generation of educated Russians emerged. The so-called intelligentsia, writers, thinkers, revolutionaries. But Russia's economy remained largely agrarian. There were few jobs for these young intellectuals, few meaningful roles in a political system dominated by autocracy. And once again, the result was conflict, the frustration of the overproduced elite mixed with the misery of the rural masses. And the Russian Empire entered a period of growing instability that would eventually lead to revolution. Across these examples, one thing becomes clear. Revolutions are not born simply from poverty. They are born from expectations denied, from ambition blocked, from competition that turns into conflict, from elites without a seat at the table, and from masses with nothing left to lose. Today, we are entering a new phase of this historical cycle. But this time, the dynamic is being supercharged by technology. Over the past decades, the economies of the developed world shifted towards services, especially high-value, specialized services. The path to success became clear. Go to college, get a degree, enter a professional field, build your career. For millions of people, especially in North America, Europe, and parts of Asia, this became the formula for stability and upward mobility. But now, artificial intelligence threatens to break that formula. In the past, automation and machines replaced manual labor. Factory workers, farmers, drivers. But AI is different. AI does not replace muscles, it replaces minds. Lawyers, accountants, journalists, programmers, managers, graphic designers, translators, artists. Professions that require higher education, skill, and experience are now facing competition from algorithms. In many cases, entry-level positions are the first to disappear. The jobs where young graduates would gain experience, where they would start climbing the professional ladder. But if those first rungs are removed, how do you climb at all? What happens to the thousands or even millions of students graduating each year? With degrees that promise them a place in the middle or upper tiers of society? What happens to the elite candidates who now find the doors closed? The winners of this AI-driven transformation, especially those who already occupy the top positions, will consolidate their power even further. For them, AI is not a threat. It is a tool, a way to reduce costs, a way to scale their influence, a way to dominate their sectors even more efficiently. But for everyone else, for the young professionals, the graduates, the skilled workers who find themselves excluded, the frustration will grow. The pool of overproduced elites will expand, and, as history suggests, frustration at the top, combined with hardship at the bottom, is a recipe for instability. Across history, whenever a society produced too many elites, too many highly educated, ambitious individuals competing for too few positions of power, conflict followed. Frustrated elites at the top, immiserated masses at the bottom. Together they formed a volatile mix, one that has fueled revolutions, uprisings, and systemic collapse, again and again. Today, we may be witnessing the early stages of a similar process, but this time, accelerated by technology, amplified by artificial intelligence. Millions of young people preparing for jobs that may no longer exist. Millions more pushed into economic precarity, while wealth concentrates ever further at the top. Will this lead to a new wave of unrest? Will the overproduction of elites, combined with the frustration of the masses, once again redraw the political and social map of the world? What do you think? Are we headed for a period of upheaval, or will the system adapt in time? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this analysis, consider leaving a like, subscribing to the channel, and sharing this video with others who might find it interesting. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.